Right, so here is a just a brief look at some of these new brushes that are in the collection called Cityscapes 3. Let me go, just as a reminder, once you have the brush selected, which is what you do by default, you can click on the Browse for Media, and at this point in the media browser, after you've added the Cityscapes 3, you should see that right there. And so you can pick any of these brushes, these media, and paint with that, right? So you can pick one. This one's a little bit big. It's a large, fairly large image in those brushes. So you might want to start with a larger image, or you might want to reduce the size of the brush. Let's take a look at both. I'm going to go and create an image that's a little bit bigger here. Let's say 1366. And I can still zoom out with my thumb drive on the, or the thumb wheel on the brush, on the mouse, and so I can stamp these down. I can have a variety of buildings appear, and that's one slow way to do this. But at least you can do this now with some of these city brushes, cityscapes. What's more interesting is if you combine all of these into a single brush that's an animated brush. So obviously if you select one, you can store it under the brush menu, and you'll notice that the bottom half of the brush is empty and transparent, and that's how we managed to get the upper part to actually show at the where the cursor is. So the building is now centered at the bottom of the building, is centered at the where the mouse cursor is, right? The brush there is the brush image actually contains the bottom half too there, but it's empty, and so you don't see anything there. And so that way it's a little bit easier to paint a row of blocks that are going to be along perhaps a line on the horizon, or along a river or something like that. So let's see, how do we combine a few of these? Let's see, I picked the first one, that's the one I had here. And what I'd like to do is really keep adding to them. So there is a film strip here I can show. Right now there's only one image there. But if I pick the next one, building 2, I can add it there, add frame. So now I have 2. And as I'm painting with it, it's alternating between one and the other. All right, let me erase this so you can see one, the next one, and so on. So it's alternating between the two, and that's what we call an animated brush. Under the brush menu, there is a few behaviors there for animated brushes. You can do things like reverse direction, go to the first frame, go first frame on mouse down, so it always starts with the first frame. And then there's other things such as loading an image sequence, like if you have Targa files or BMP files. You can load an image from file sequence. But I'm going to keep adding here. This is number 3. I'm going to add this one too. Where's my add frame? There you go. So now we have 3. Let's grab this thing here down, and we have 3 blocks in that sequence. Now they're still very tight together, and that's the step distance here. I can reduce the step or increase the step distance, so I need to travel a little bit farther to actually see the block separately. But you can notice how you get one of these and then the next one, and so it's cycling through that. There's a few more I'm going to add. There's the building number 4, again add frame, and then building number 5, add frame, building number 6, add frame, and you get the gist of it here. It's basically now building a sequence of blocks, city blocks, into an animated brush. There's a lot of things we can do with that too. We might want to give them a bluish tint. We might want them to be a little bit darker or brighter. And so now that we have this stored brush, we might actually save this back in the media browser, right? Even in the same Cityscapes, or maybe under another one like My Cityscapes. You could say save media right there, 6 new blocks, something like that. So now I have a brush with 6 new blocks right there, and I can pick one and do this one, and then pick the 6 new blocks and get back to this. So while I have this stored copy, I can also work with changing some of the options here, such as the size. If I want that to be a little bit smaller, all of these frames will be smaller in the live sequence here. So now I have these brushes a little bit more usable. but they're still a little bit too methodological. They're like not randomized enough. I may need to add some random behavior. Also, perhaps different color hue, saturation. Well, it's a grayscale image for each of those in this case, so I could possibly change the brightness, the value, or red, green, blue. If I reduce the red, it will get a bit more of a bluish tint, right? There you go. So you have a bit more of like a feeling that it's reflecting the skylight around it. Or to the other hand, if you want to actually show a bit more of a sunset reddish tint, you can reduce the blue and the green and give it more of a yellowish or a reddish appearance. Right, something like that, purplish perhaps. All right, there's other things you could do, and that's to make each image randomly resize or change position a little bit so it's not following your mouse perfectly. And that's the settings, of course. Down here, let's go pin this down. The settings, the brush settings, allows changing some additional parameters such as random position, so that it's a bit distributing it in a bit more random way. And there's also random size, so these blocks are not going to be all the same size. There's even a random hue or random saturation, so some of them may look a little bit darker or brighter. Here, random value would probably be the way to do that. You may need to enable the brush transforms. That's not enabled by default. If they are large images, we'll know why. But now we do have all the sizing and color changes and other things applied there too. Now there's one more thing you might want to do, and that's to have it scale differently based on the distance. So when it's far away, you want them small, and as they get closer, you want them bigger. And there's an automatic way to do that. There's of course also just resizing it right here. You could say, okay, let's change this, but it might yeah, no, that will work. So you could basically do this. You could make them really small down by the horizon, and then have another city block a bit bigger. That's too big. Let's get something like this, and then finally just a few really big ones. Right. And there is also an automatic way to do that. Let me show you that. So down here on the right side, I have the sidebar on the right side. Of course, you could have it on the left. I think by default it's on the left side. So that's part of the layout. You could have this toolbar, and then there's a sidebar. Sidebar on left or sidebar on right. I have it on the right side. And when you look down the sidebar, there is a category below the layers and below the info. Let me go hide these. There's layers, info, and grids. If you open the grids, at the very bottom there is an option called Z-Scale Guide. And what that does is it uses the swap image as a guide to scale the brush on the fly. Right now, if I switch to the swap image, it's plain white, so it's the maximum size, and it's not going to affect it. So any changes would be because of the random size that I have here. Random size, if I make that a bigger impact, you'll see more of the smaller ones mixed with the big ones as well. But if you want that to automatically scale based on a distance, what you do is you put that in the swap image. Just go to the swap buffer or swap image, which looks the same incidentally for right now. What we'll do is we'll create a gradient. Right? So for instance, here's the tool with the gradients. We have linear gradients, circular gradients. Let's take the linear gradient first and make sure, look on the gradients, which one are we using? Something like this here, the black to white. So black to white, something like this, right? So the darker it is, the smaller the brush will be. This is a scale of how much size to apply, how much rescaling or resizing to apply on the brush. All right. So white will keep it at full size. Black is going to be minimal, and somewhere in between is where we'll see that transition. So if you want this transition to be all the way from up here to down here, perhaps even at an angle, maybe on the slope of a hill or something like that, you can give it something like that. You can even use the circular gradient, right? You could go something like this, or invert the. Let's see, where's my gradients sweep editor? You could reverse it so it goes from white to black. And then your circular gradient would have white nearby and dark in the corners out there. Right? So either way, you'll be able to scale and change the size of the brush as you hover over it. Let's go check that out. Let's go switch back to the main image, and now the swap image is behind there and acting as a Z scale guide. Make sure this thing here down here in the lower right corner is enabled. And so let's go back to the brush, and you'll see that the size of the brush image preview, the custom brush preview, is now scaling dynamically, giving you an idea of roughly what the size of that brush is going to be. So if you paint it around here, these are going to be very small. Right? You can zoom in a little bit to get a better idea. Maybe the step distance is too close. Let's make it a little bit farther. That will make it faster to paint too, because there's a lot of events accumulated otherwise, and there's a lot of rescaling on the fly here, so it's a little bit slow on my system. It might be faster on yours, but as you get closer here, the brush is going to be bigger, right? So you can quite easily do something like this here, where you have a skyline or a cityscape along the horizon, barely visible or recognizable, and then as you come closer, you might want to even make the step distance even bigger, and have some accumulation or an agglomeration of a few other big blocks here. And then at some point you might want to just stop the Z scale and go back to that brush preview, the cityscapes, and just pick an individual one. Perhaps have this one here in the real foreground. You can always store that one too, by the way. You can store and give it about the same settings as you had over here, right? This one had the animated brush here, had a little bit of reduction or increase in the reddish tint, so we can do that here too. And so this one is now kind of mimicking that. It's perhaps too big, so we can go there, and I'll just place one more here. Perhaps use X to switch it, right? X is a shortcut for flipping it horizontally. Y is flip it vertically. So if you want, you can have even another appearance on that, another style, another look on that there as well. All right, so hopefully that will give you some ideas on how you can work with those. You have a couple of these buildings separately. That's what we did here in Cityscape 6. We have 6 or 7. There are some variants. There are building 7. There's building 8. There's a couple of towers. And what you can do is you can put them into your own sequence. We've actually put a few of those into sequence, like this one here is building 9 in 4 different styles. So you have an animated brush there, and the whole idea is to give you a tool you can use right away, but also some tools that you can customize yourself to your likings. And we'll be creating some more tutorials to show you how to create these in the first place if you have a nice city block that you can use to build your own. Because many times it really needs just one image, one big city block, but you can put it in different sizes. Like this one here, we have 4 different ones, right? We have building 9A, that's this one. We have building 9B, that's this one. You see, it's the same image exactly. It's exactly the same image. We just scaled it in a non-uniform way, so it's a little bit taller, probably the same width. And then we have number C, that one is a little bit more narrow, but even taller. So we essentially managed to create 4 different styles. There's number D, the last one. So that one's very tall, and you see the size of the glass, the window is a bit of a stretch here now, but still it's very usable if you put them all together into a sequence. So we have buildings 9 ABC, there they are. If you store that and start working with that to perhaps make it a bit smaller, perhaps give it a tint, let's see, reduce the red so you have a bluish tint, you can quite easily create city blocks like this. Use X to reverse the angle or flip it, and create some interesting looks in a heartbeat there. There's another one here. That one is, I think, a collection of 6 or 7 images, just to give you some ideas of stuff you can do with it, but by all means that's not the limit. You can create your own, and that's really what we want you to do with that. So let's see my final one. I'm going to go center this and perhaps give it a little bit of a bluish. Okay, brush, store and manage it there. I'm going to go reduce a bit of the red so it has a little bit of that bluish look, And what we need is, of course, some sort of a gradient. So let's go draw a circular gradient or a linear gradient. Let's see a gradient that looks good like this one. Something like this. No, that's upside down there. So let's give it something like that. There you go. And now we can put the buildings right here in front, perhaps a little bit smaller at first, right? And then a little bit bigger. And really, that's basically where you start building those city blocks and to your likings and adapt them to your need. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.